Simon Harris has been on a globe-trotting mission yet again around the world. His latest junket has been to Washington DC for a 30-minute that became an hour-long meeting with lame duck US President Joe Biden. You remember the last time that an Irish Taoiseach visited Washington DC back in March following the crushing referendum defeats. So nobody wants to talk about it. The political establishment wants to ignore those referendum defeats that cost over €23 million, and followed by his resignation when he arrived back in Dublin. But it's important because this visit was to mark about 100 years of the diplomatic relations between the United States and Ireland, the first country to recognise the Free States' diplomatic credentials. And it is also important to note because Simon Harris was expecting a big celebration, and Joe Biden apologised because there was no big celebration. There wasn't the wining and dining in the Rose Garden of the White House. He had to do with a short meeting in the Oval Office, and a lot of the Irish media weren't allowed to attend the meeting in the Oval Office, and camera people also as well. I think that was only from the United States side. So it was a bit of a fall from grace for Simon Harris, unsurprisingly, because Harris has been globe-trotting non-stop around the world since he's become Taoiseach a number of months ago. And of course, it's important because Harris in advance was talking about the so-called shared values between the United States and Ireland, the unique and special relationship, and to renew and strengthen the relationship and the shared democratic values and the freedom and rules-based international order that both countries support. Now, isn't this interesting? He also said he wants to talk and thank the United States for jobs, opportunities and prosperity in Ireland and the US also as well. Now, very interesting. Simon Harris was going in all guns blazing apparently to challenge Biden over what was happening in Gaza. Of course, he's a complete lapdog for what's going on in Ukraine when he comes out with that sort of nonsense and spin around the so-called rules-based international order. Whose rules? Rules of the hegemony of the United States, I would argue. But of course, he spoke to Ireland's foreign policy to say it's consistent and they're always looking for de-escalation, ceasefire, dialogue, peace and respect. Well, absolutely, but in practice we know it's completely different. Complete hypocrisy in the extreme by Simon Harris, who's funding the proxy war in Ukraine. But of course, there was no mention of the proxy war in Ukraine. There was only the same support that has gone on for the last number of years. Recently, Harris was in Kiev that handed over another €36 million to Zelensky. More money, more weapons, more war, despite what Harris says. And it's also interesting, the erosion of our neutrality is a critical part of this. There was no mention in the media of the incursions by NATO warships into Irish ports over the last number of days, but of course they wouldn't talk about those issues because they're trying to have us in a slow march towards more militarism with the European Union and de facto NATO that Biden is at the helm of. Even though he is a lame duck president, he's only going to be sitting for the next number of months until the new president is elected. But of course as well, Harris never spoke about the Nord Stream. In the last number of days, another report has come out there regarding the Nord Stream explosion. Coming from a couple of sources in Denmark and newspapers in Denmark about the involvement of US warships in the region of the Nord Stream that turned their transponders off and were told the Danish shipping master took a visit out to see if thought it was an accident, and he was told to turn back. Now this has been reported again in the last number of days. So we all know about the Nord Stream explosion. We saw the reports, for instance, the great investigative reporter, Pulitzer Prize winner Seymour Hersh, and his comments about the Nord Stream explosion. And this is also important because of the fallacy that the Irish government are bringing us into this war in Ukraine that led to huge issues around what's going on with high energy costs and the sanctions also as well. But also he spoke about Gaza, and he's never went far enough to say stop supplying arms to Israel. Of course, in advance of this discussion, there was a phone call conversation with a conversation with Netanyahu, and he committed their ironclad commitment and support to Israel. Now, Harris didn't say anything about stop sending arms to Israel. He didn't say about the use of Irish sovereign airspace for weapons, for munitions, for arms to be sent to Israel. But of course, Harris is a complete and utter cowardly leader, which we've come to expect of many of our political leaders who are just yes men for the establishment. And it's very important as well, because in the context of this as well, we've seen him meet Samantha Power. Now, Samantha Power is the head of USAID, which is famous for its colour revolutions in many countries, and under the premise of humanitarian interventions. And their modus operandi is to stabilise countries. So we had a meeting with Samantha Power in advance of the meeting with Biden. There you have it. So Harris's whistle-stop visit, that couldn't be done by a phone call, couldn't be done by Zoom, during a hurricane that was headed for, Hurricane Milton, that was headed for Florida. He still turned up at the White House for his latest junket. And it's also very important because the released remarks from the White House on this mention nothing of this. It just mentioned the same old spin and waffle about the deep connection and economic ties between the United States and Ireland, shared history, heritage, hope in the years ahead, and all the same spin and stuff we've come to expect. Of course, we have a huge history with the United States. So many people were forced to go there because of immigration for many, many generations. And ordinary people are the ones that suffer from the costs of these policies, from the wars, from the neoliberal policies, from tax haven Ireland that a lot of the US multinationals benefit from. We've most recently, we've seen the Apple case where the Irish government spent over €10 million to stop taking the €13 billion, which would help and go a long way towards supporting and helping people in poverty and people in dire straits in our society. But of course, this is the way the system operates in Ireland as well, where they're just beholden to the big multinationals rather than interested in building up our own domestic economy and supporting local industries in Ireland to grow and develop as well, that would be proper and sustainable for the future for ordinary people's lives, not to mention the small businesses that are deeply impacted also as well. Ordinary people are the ones that are being destroyed. So we have all these social issues, but then you look at Simon Harris globetrotting around the world, where a phone call could do, where a Zoom call could do, and I'm sure Eamon Ryan has been on the same plane essentially, travelling around the world. We saw that with the last Patrick's Day junket where Ryan swanned off to Brazil instead of doing a Zoom call. So much for preaching to ordinary working class people, much the same they do with their climate agenda as well. So thanks for the support of my video, really appreciate it. Please press subscribe to my YouTube channel, and thanks so much to everybody who has supported me through buying me coffee. I'm very grateful. Most recently a couple of people have donated, and I'll mention them up in the next video as well. So please do, and thanks so much for all the support. Slán, take care, bye bye.